Welcome to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We're happy you're here. On the podcast, we're certain that you'll relate to the caregiver stories and find comfort with your honorary sisters. Now, before we start, I want to remind you to go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's full of useful information that you can immediately use. Now, let's learn more about today's guest. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Natalie.
How's it going today?
It's going pretty good. Just hanging out, doing my thing. What?
You know what? We've got Cassie with us today.
Oh my gosh, not Cassie Abel.
Oh yeah, that's exactly who we have with us. And I'm not going to lie to you. I think, she's pretty awesome. And she has quite the story. She had quite the story from the weekend. You could have saw Cassie on Facebook. Woo! Between children getting sick and dogs eating dinner, they ate pizza off the counter. But
the whole thing. But we're not here to talk about pizza, although I think we all know we like pizza.
We want to talk about Cassie, and we want to talk about her caregiving journey because, man, she has got quite the journey with her mother, and her mother is fierceness. She is hashtag fierce in a small package. So, Jay, why don't you tell us about our friend Cassie?
So I'm going to start by saying that we had an intro call with Cassie. It feels like yesterday, but a couple of months ago. And we have promised today, Cassie, I put some tissue on my desk. I'm not using it though, because your story is amazing. So Cassie lives in a small town in Indiana. That is her hometown. So I love that because I lived in my hometown forever. She's got her husband, Scott, and then she's got two kids, Emma and Archer. But she's been in healthcare for over 20 years. But where that passion came from is her mom.
That's right.
And that's where our story is. And her mom's name is Carol. Carol was diagnosed with ALS in 2020. She had symptoms 4 years prior, but Carol was she was a nurse, long-term care. And before that, in the nursing, she was a nursing home administrator. But anybody that's in healthcare, I'm pretty sure knows that she self-diagnosed and decided that she could probably just handle all those. Cassie, you would probably say that she could just handle all those symptoms. But Cassie's mom was 4'10", and she was a force to be reckoned with.
4'10" and all up 10 foot tall.
Yeah,
that's right.
On the inside, she was 10 foot tall. She was a giant.
But she is the person that I love this. She's the person who lit the fire for Cassie's love of healthcare. And Carol dedicated her life to her patients, her family, and her employees. For 15 months, Cassie dedicated her life, her love, and her energy to taking care of her mother, who had taken care of so many others. So today, Cassie's going to tell us about that journey, but you guys have got to hear about Cassie's blog because that is where she taught people about that journey, about all the ideas, tips, and tricks that her mom and she learned along the way. But she also vented. It was a safe haven, just like what we hope that we've created here on Confessions. She talks about the good, bad, and the ugly too. So
love it.
See?
She is a kindred sister. She is total sister for us.
So Cassie, we're ready.
Let's do it.
So let's talk about it. So tell us about this inspiration, this person. Give us a little background on 4'10", this force to be reckoned with.
Thank you. Yes. So my mother, 4'10", but 10 foot tall and bulletproof is what we always used to say. And she was, the administrator of the nursing homes that would wear these high heels and you hear a click, 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 click down the hallway. And all of the employees would stand to attention and scatter and make sure that these beds are made if her patients look great, because she was all about the dignity, respect, and the love. And so I grew up with that as my role model. I remember going out to eat with my family, and there'd be a little old man sitting by himself, and she would say, maybe this was his wife's favorite restaurant, and they're sitting there, it's their anniversary and he's all alone. And, she would put that perspective into me. And so a lot of the see what you see from their eyes, listen from their ears, walk in their shoes is where that came from with her. But I mean, as compassionate and as loving as she she was also very much a general, her way or the highway. And you have to respect that and fear that all at the same time. So, but she raised, there's 9 of us kids, but most of us she had raised, there's about 3 of us at home from the time I was born. And she just worked herself up and worked for everything that she ever had. And my father had fallen to cancer and battled that for about 9 years. She took care of him in and out every day. And when he had passed, she started to have a little bit more of a life of her own, but she still worked. She loved working. That was her thing. She was an administrator at the nursing home. She loved what she did. And she was about 70 years old, 70, 71, when she started having some issues when she would start walking. And through my blog, the very first blog post I did was kind of going back and knowing that bringing her home, I knew that there was going to be an avenue I needed, but I wanted to kind of retell the story a little bit of what she was going through. So you see that I called her Weeble Wobble. Her and I worked for the same company. I was also a nursing home administrator. Yeah. And we were at a meeting in our state capital, and we had to walk down this long corridor, and she was kind of doing this Weeble Wobble move. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? And she's like, well, I think I did something to my back. And I said, well, we need to get that checked out. Of course, she's a nurse. That's not going to happen. And I'm like, well, you look like Weeble Wobble. And it was a joke that we had for quite a while. She had lived about an hour away from where I live. And every time I'd see her, she'd be Weeble wobbling. I actually had videos on my phone because I'm like, Mom, something's not right. And she's like, oh, I'm fine. She decided.
I want to ask a question. Your mom was 70.
That's what I was thinking.
And still working.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think that's important because she'd been healthy up until this point. Okay. So keep going.
Yeah. So she decided though she was going to semi-retire. Okay. And I say semi-retire. She
was working 40 hours a week.
Yeah. She was not going to be in the buildings, but she was going to be working at home as a consultant for the company that she had worked for. So she really liked payroll and labor adjustments and things she liked to watch her time. And make sure you don't get overtime. So she did that for about 20 other buildings from home. But she thought, this would be a time I could start traveling. She had a significant other, Tom, that she lived with, and they were going to travel around, and she was going to work from home and live her life that she deserved to live. Yeah. That was in February of 2019. Yeah. So she decided to go to Vegas for the first time ever and had a great time in Vegas, went shopping, saw some shows. And she flew home, and in the airport, she fell. And she gave me a call, and she said, I just face planted in the airport. I'm like, are you okay? And she said, I'm fine. But she's like, I think it's these shoes I'm wearing. And I'm like, well, don't be wearing those shoes, Yeah.
Captain Obvious. Those moments where we offer the best advice ever. Don't
wear those.
Yeah, so you guys are in healthcare. Way to go, Cassie. Yeah,
I know, right? Alarm bells hadn't even started yet. She Weeble wobbling, and then she fell down. Yeah, Weeble wobbles don't fall down. That's the whole get of it. So a few months later, she went to Memphis with her sister for a vacation, and they're at the casino in Tunica. And all of a sudden, she face planted. This time, she kind of got hurt. She got some skin on the rug, and she called me and she said, "I fell again." So now I'm like, what do you mean you fell again? And she said, well, I don't know. She said, 1 minute I'm up and the next minute I'm down. And she goes, I think it's these shoes. And I said, well, are you wearing the same shoes? She said, well, no. And I'm like, So then I started kind of thinking things were going on. We decided to we were vacationing all 2019. Thank goodness, because 2020 came, right? Right. So in 2019, Labor Day weekend, her and I decided to go to Nashville and have a weekend in Nashville. And we had a great time. She was walking a little bit slower, but she's 70 at this point, 71 years old. And a few things stick out with me on that trip. One, the way she was still Weeble wobbling and kind of slow, but I thought, she's getting older. And then we were having to go up some steps. And she stood there at the end of the steps for a minute and took a hold of the railing and had to lift her foot up to go step by step. And I thought, alarm bells started ringing on that one. I'm like, something's going on, Mama. And she said, well, I think I got an issue with my hip. I'm going to have to go to the doctor when we get back. I said, I think that's a real good idea, Yeah. Going back to this real quick, knowing that kind of where she went with this, there was a time where we were standing in line for the trolley, and there was a lady who was there with a woman in a wheelchair. And they were helping her load on the trolley so she could go and do the Nashville tour like we were going to do. And mom and I, of course, long-term care were, watching how they were doing. And she had said, well, this is my friend, and we were going to be, going to go, and she wanted to go travel. And I told her I'd take care of her. And I remember distinctively my mother looking at me and asking me, would you do that for me? She goes, if I ever get to the point I can't do something, I was like, it, but I'm like, you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. You're fine,
Yeah.
So things started to progress a little bit more. Again, she lived about an hour away. I'm busy at work, and I'd get texts every once in a while or a phone call that she was kind of tripping at home and falling at home. And at this point in time, with our healthcare brains, I'm like, Mom, something else is going on. So she ended up going to the doctors and doing all the scans and blood tests and all the works, and they couldn't find anything wrong. Everything seemed to be just fine, but she was still progressively falling and weaker. At this time, when she would drive, she would have to lift her leg into the car, and which is scary enough as it is. But so finally in November of 2019, her doctor ordered an EMG, which is a test that shows, the process of muscles and how they're reacting to the nerves.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed significant loss. Yeah. And the neurologist at that time, she said, we're not able to get a final diagnosis, but it looks like this is ALS. And I remember that phone call, and she said, it's either ALS or MS. She said, but they really think it's ALS, but they can't diagnose me because we have to do another test in 6 months to see.
Did you go with her, or did she?
She went with her. She went with Tom at that time.
Okay. Yeah. So she did have somebody who went with her.
Yes. Yeah. Because at this point, driving was becoming a very hard thing for her to do. I remember going to see her towards the end of 2019 or beginning of January 2020. And at that time, she was already having to use kind of a walker to get around. So we knew we knew. I mean, the moment we heard it was ALS, we knew that this is what was happening.
Cassie, during all this time, she's still working.
Yes.
You're working full time. Mm-hmm. You have your 2 kids. Your husband works. You guys are all, even though all this is going on, you guys are it's still life is normal. And she's still like, well, whatever. This may be going on, but I'm working from home.
She's a honey badger, straight up.
Yeah.
She's a honey badger.
I just want to make sure that
stop me. I'm going to keep.
Yeah.
She kept on. Nope. She, and with her, long-term care and knowing where this was going, in January of 2020, she went ahead and started ordering like supplies, even though we haven't had a final diagnosis, even though she was still able to kind of walk around. Mm-hmm. My family and I went and saw her, and I believe it was at the end of, it was the end of February. Me and the kids went up there, and we were going to go out to eat, and we were going to go to the pet shop, and because her little dog had passed away, and we just wanted to kind of look at some animals. And she had to hold on to me to walk. I had to help her in the car and swing her legs in. So they knew but we couldn't get any kind of medication or anything to start because we don't have a diagnosis. Mm-hmm. There's at least a 6-month delay when that happens. So she went and got a hospital bed. She went and ordered a Hoyer lift, a sit to stand. She already had it and had it kind of stuck to the side.
Oh my gosh.
So I remember driving home that end of that February, she was having to transfer herself to the bathroom using a walker, and she'd be shaken, because she's having to hold herself up because her leg muscles were really, really weak. And that was again in February, the end of 2020. And that was the last time I saw her until June of 2020. Because again, I worked in the nursing homes. March 10th, 2020, lockdown happened. And
that's right.
Being an administrative nursing home, I was done. I mean, my life became my nursing home.
That's right.
So we, communicated on the phone every single day, like we always had. And she had her follow-up EMG in May of 2020, and that confirmed that she does have ALS.
And I'll say this too, Cassie, because I think people are going to be, I think it would be easy. It would be easy to say, I can't believe that you didn't see your mom for 3 months. Yeah. And I would say pandemic, but if you've never worked in congregate care, and I've worked in congregate care at the same time, but with children, it was chaotic. It was policies that didn't exist. It was, you lived in your facility because those individuals truly could not leave, whether they were children or adults. Our mom was in the assisted living facility. We had just moved her. And then we were telling her that she was going to do all these great things. And then it was just like suck the wind out of everything. And so I know that had to be extremely stressful for you. trying to manage taking care of other individuals, other adults, and your staff at the same time, trying to support your mom whose illness is progressing.
Yes. And I had 2 children, and I had one that was in school.
Oh yeah. Oh, and then you had those kids.
Yeah.
And
those
you had your husband.
Things I made.
You had those kids, right? They're needy, right? They're not. Yeah. They're not older either. They're younger.
Nope.
Because they were what, 6 and 9? Is that
at that time? They were 6
so they were needy.
Full shutdown. Yeah, they went on spring break and never went back.
Oh my God!
Darn it!
So you're like, this is like, honestly, this is like the perfect storm. It's like a trifecta of the Bermuda Triangle of, no, we did not have this happen. Like, having to educate your children, you are having to take care of your aging population that you work and your staff, and your mom is an hour away. And I could only imagine how pulled you felt.
It was. And I mean, to this day, I blogged about it at that time too. But, thankfully, weirdly enough, I say thankfully, my husband's work shut down as well. So therefore, he was at home and he was the educator.
Oh, thank goodness.
Because I was working 60, 70 hours, when that happened with COVID in the nursing homes, everything got shut down, and all the rules and regulations that we have to follow got flipped upside down. New ones came out every single day.
Yes, they did.
And and thankfully at that time, we had not been hit in our area. We were all still negative, but still the worry. And then my staff who have their kids at home and no one could find toilet paper. I mean, it was just, it was chaotic. And so I was on the phone texting and calling with her. She was still working, being a consultant.
Of course, she was still working.
Yes, she was.
Probably, I wonder, Cassie, about how much the pandemic also helped her focus on something else.
It did. Now, with the pandemic, it was at this point in time, she had already lost everything from the waist down. She was already in her motorized wheelchair and zooming around in that thing. She sent me pictures of it. It did everything but going all the way up and back and forth. And but she would still be able to pull up to her table and still do her work and her reports. And granted, she was a consultant for my building too. So I was able to talk with her work-wise on what we're supposed to be doing. But the day that she got her diagnosis, I was out in the backyard. I remember just crying on the phone. She was crying, and my mama never really cried. And because she knew what was coming.
Yeah.
So I remember her distinctively saying, I hope I get COVID. I hope that I die of a heart attack or a stroke. I wish something will take me out because I know what's coming.
Yeah.
And I understood where she was coming from because I come from long-term care. I get that. My rest of my family really didn't understand that. Yeah. So, 2020 was very much a blur. Her birthday was in June. And I decided, we were still negative around my area. She was too. I was like, screw it. I'm going to go see my mama. Because like you said, I have never in my life gone 3 months without seeing her. And it was one of the hardest things. I was going through so many hard things at work that she can correlate with as well. But not being able to have that, knowing that she was ill and not being there it was killing me. So I went to go see her for her birthday. And that was the first time I'd seen her. The last time I had seen her, she could transfer off of her chair and transfer herself to the toilet. When I saw her in June, she was already having to use the Hoyer lift. And straight, strong face, masked up, took tests before we went to see her. It was a great visit, but I started crying on the way home. And for months, every time I'd visit her, I would cry on the way home just because I was losing a piece of my mom. Yeah. But she kept on. She continued working. I continued working. 2020 again was such a blur. Towards the end of 2020 is when my nursing home got hit with COVID. So it was December 3rd that we got our first positive. And from December 3rd up until December 31st, I never left my nursing home. I slept in my office half the time because once she got hit, we were a small nursing home. We had 35 residents, and every single one became positive. And I lost 12 of them in a 2-week period. It was terrible. I had staff in the hospital. And at this time, mom started progressing even more to where she was not able to move her arms as much. It was progressing. So crap was hitting the fan everywhere you could turn. I spent so much of my time at work dedicated to my staff and to my residents that I was not with my family a lot. And starting in January of 2021, things needed to change. COVID took a lot out of us, long-term care. I had 18 years of long-term care, loved it, still my heart. But I had a young family at home. I had a mother that was sick, and my mother was my world. So things needed to change. And weirdly enough, a new position opened up at the hospital, and something that I'm able to do less hours, but still have a good impact in our community, which is important to me. So I'm kind of going through a little bit more because we have the whole 15 months that she lived with us. In February of 2021, mom was starting to become more and more dependent on Tom, who's also her age, to help her shower her, bathe her, take her to the restroom. She was trying to use the Hoyer lifts and everything else. And it was not working. I mean, I would go see her every weekend at least to try to help take care of her. But her body was just failing her, as strong as her mind was, and as much velocity as she had in her to continue on, her body continued to fail her. So I remember getting a phone call in March, and she said, I'm going to start looking at some nursing homes around town, like where I live. And at this time, 2021, COVID's still a thing, and there's a lot of visitation restrictions. And I said, Mama, I can't have, and nursing homes are wonderful. I'm an advocate, I'm 100%. I said, but you're not going to go into a place where they're going to restrict me visiting you. I can't do that. I mean, they have to, but I can't do that. I said, we're going to figure this out. My husband and I at the time lived in a small home with our kids. It was our starter home. And we had already been talking about trying to find something bigger. And at this time, I was talking with him and had multiple discussions with him on, I want to bring her here and I want her to live with us. And he was on board with it. He's like, you're right. He's like, this is the right thing we need to do. So we started looking for a 4-bedroom home, and weirdly enough, one popped up.
This is like my warning, like, get ready for your blessing, your God.
Wait for it.
I'm like, get ready, folks.
Because we just had a God intervention is about what to happen.
Yeah.
We had a few of those in my story.
That's right.
We one popped up, and the one that popped up was my childhood home. And we came to go look at it, and it didn't look like it looked like when I lived here, because the person that had bought it, we've been gone 20 years from this house. They had taken the carpet out, and it was all hardwood floors. They had opened up spaces and doorways. And the first thought I thought when I walked in here was, her wheelchair is going to fit through everything.
Yeah.
So we bought it, and I got my chills back.
I got them too.
We bought a childhood home. And so when I say that we brought my mama home, it wasn't just brought my mama home to my hometown. We brought her home, the home that she had with my dad, with me growing up as a child. There was a lot of kinks, and there are a lot of things that we had to think about how we're going to do this, because I'm work full time. My husband works full time. My kids are busy. I mean, they're in plays, they're in art, they're in camps, and we wanted to try to find caregivers, during the day. And at first, we wanted to do from morning till noon, and mom could be by herself for the afternoon for a while, because she'd been by herself, still working via her laptop. And so we moved in on Memorial Weekend, and we were wanting to bring mom home around June, but then we had a few more things with construction we had to finish to get her room ready. And so she came in July. So I took the first week off, and at this time we still hadn't 100% got the caregiver situation down. We were just kind of flying by our panties at this time.
Absolutely.
That's something that we typically do.
Done that.
But we're going to figure it out,
Most everybody around.
So the great thing, when mom was working in the nursing homes and was administrator here in town, we're a small town, she trained and worked with a lot of wonderful people. And a lot of our CNAs and nurses in town know her and worked under her. So I had reached out on Facebook, and I'm like, I'm looking for some caregivers for my mom. And I got flooded with people wanting to help. So we ended up hiring 3 ladies who worked under my mom for years, some for almost 17 years. And on their days off, they would come and they would stay with my mom. So we had made a schedule for those 3 girls to come and work up until noon each day.
Yeah.
And at this time, mama was able to use her hands. She couldn't lift her arms up real high, but she could lift it a little bit. Her hands were still working, but they were getting the tingles. So she knew they were going to go. And so we were good till noon. I'd come home at lunch, and then she'd be by herself for a couple of hours before the kids got home, and everything was good for about a week. It was great.
That sounds like us with our mom. Everything.
I'm like, a week?
About a week.
I was at least expecting a month.
I was thinking a month.
Cassie.
No.
It was about a week, because one weekend I decided to go to Walmart with my daughter. Mom's going to stay by herself. I get a call, and her arm had fallen off the wheelchair, and she didn't have the strength to lift her arm back up anymore. She was still working. And it was a painful process for me because my mom is the way I want, it's the way I want it. So you're trying to get her laptop and her notes, and she couldn't lift her arms. So when she'd scoot her arms, it would push off the tape. I mean, she would get frustrated. Wow. And she started getting real frustrated with her failing body because for some reason, the moment we moved in, she started progressing even more. Few months go by, she's starting to have problems lifting the spoon up to her mouth. And she's like, I'll be dead before I let somebody feed me. I'll starve myself to death. But eventually that changed, and she was allowing us to, to feed her. At this time, that week when I told you is that I needed to find caregivers for the afternoon too. I needed somebody from 8 to 5. Yeah. So again, reaching out, and we were able to hire 3 more girls. And so I started working on a schedule. I just thought I got rid of scheduling when I was a nursing home administrator, but now I got to do schedules again.
You've got 6 people coming in, coordinating. And I'm assuming it was 5 days a week because you probably covered the weekend.
I did. Yep. 5 days a week from 8 to 5 is what their schedule was. We had one girl that would do 8 to noon or 8 to 1, and another one that would do 1 to 5. And they did alternate days. So usually in the nursing homes, they have 2 days off during the week. And those days off during the week is when they would come be here with us, and we would pay them privately and work with those schedules. But, COVID was still big. Their kids got sick. We got sick. There were a lot of times that I thankfully was able to work from home, and I would have been able to do none of this if I was still a nursing home administrator. But being the director at the hospital, I was able to coordinate my schedule to work with this. As the summer progressed, so did her ALS. And towards the fall, it got to the point that she knew she was not going to be able to work anymore. And it was mainly because she couldn't lift. And we knew this happened because in October of 2021, we got everything set up for her to be able to do her reports and be on her calls with her people. And I walk in and she has a pen in her mouth and she's pecking the keys. And that's how she was typing.
Hey ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day. And the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing.
We're talking a lot about your mom's ALS itself. I want to switch for a second. I want you to talk about you.
All right. So during that time, working full time at the hospital, surges of COVID happening. My daughter and my son both involved in musicals during the summer, sports, camps. I'm also married. And so I also like to see my husband every once in a while. So even though we had the caregivers during the day, 8 to 5, it was me in the evenings and me on the weekends.
Yeah.
So that meant that I get home at 5 o'clock and kind of high five the caregiver as they walked out. And I would walk in and it would be starting supper, starting to get things with my mother, who is needy. She was very needy and she was demanding. I mean, that's just her personality.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times she didn't feel comfortable, or she would rather me do things than the caregiver. So she'd wait until they left. And all of a sudden, I need to go to the bathroom. I need you to do this. I've got my kids yelling, Mom, look at this. Mom, what's for supper? Dishes need to be done. We decided to buy 2 miniature doodles, and that was a stupid mistake, but they need to go out. They got to clean their messes. I mean, it was constant. And at this point with my blog, I started blogging live. And this is when the venting started, because one, I hated coming home. And I hated feeling that way, but I hated coming home. My work was my sanctuary. It was my time. But I would come home and it would be a second time job times 4. And that would go, getting the kids ready for their, baths, and have to get ready for camp the next day, having to do with her. My husband's working, he comes home and he's needed to do stuff. But having mom was like having another third child. Right. And during my blog, and when I'm venting about a lot of these things, I'm wanting to normalize this, because as her disease progressed, so did, the demanding portion of my life.
Yeah.
And when she stopped having to work, it got worse, because that was something that was keeping her focused and to go. My mom was never one to sit and watch TV. By this time, she had already went through like Lost and ER and Grey's Anatomy and everything else you could think of.
10 years of seasons.
And that was her life. And that was just not her. She was always a go-getter and a go-get person. And that's what stinks about this ALS, is because you're trapped in a body. So her frustrations that she had was her frustrations with her disease and her body, not with me.
Yeah.
But she'd take them out on me. I knew the difference with that. That's why I knew I'd be able to handle taking care of her. But we're human too, and we have feelings, and they get
I think
hurt.
that's important to remember.
And
I don't
we
care.
Get frustrated.
I'm in the healthcare field, and I have taken care of children with behavioral health issues, and I've seen some of the worst behaviors. And even though I'm trained to deal with that, when it is someone that you care about, when it is someone close to you, someone personal, it becomes hard.
Very much so. So I should also, my mom didn't sleep well. She was unable to turn herself in bed. So she had a baby monitor, and I had the baby monitor next to me, and she'd call out my name about 3 or 4 times a night. I would have to turn her. So I didn't sleep anymore. My son was a horrible baby, so I was kind of used to that, but that was my reality. On the weekends, when you're supposed to be relaxing, go do fun things with your family, go yard sales, go, to the mall or whatever you want to do. I didn't have that. I worked as, my mother's caregiver. So getting her up in the mornings, getting her baths, making her something to eat, which is always different than what my kids and my husband wants to eat. And then getting up throughout the night. You can't leave because she can't be by herself if she needs something. So it was just me. There was no time for me. And then my family time got really dragged down. And I remember the feelings, you girls have this too, I'm sure, but you always hear I can't believe what you're doing. That's a wonderful thing you're doing. You're such a godsend. You're so wonderful. And that's great to hear.
I am not the second coming.
No. And I also
was thinking, I am not the second coming.
And I would always feel guilty, because here I am having these feelings like, what did I just do? Why did I do this? I wish I had never done this. I missed my life. I can't, those feelings of frustration and anger, I had the love, trust me, that's there.
I know that. Absolutely.
But the feelings that you feel and hearing people say how great you are, and that's wonderful, it made you feel worse, because you were having these inner dialogues with yourself, and you're like, I'm a fraud. Yes. But you're not, and I remember, there would be lots of tears and crying with this. And, as 2022 started around, it got even worse when it came to her body. So at this point in time, she lost her arms completely. She is paralyzed from the neck down. Yeah. And, when you first move someone home, you hear about all this help you're going to have, and all people, I'm going to be there and I'm going to do this. And it doesn't happen, and people don't want to see somebody in that condition. And I get it.
It's hard to see.
But it's, something that you kind of wish you would have had, someone to be able to say, well, I'm going to kind of hang with her while you go do this. And don't get me wrong, I did have the help. My caregivers, during the week, if there was something on the weekend, like we went to the St. Louis with my family, and it took a lot of coordinating and a lot of planning, but I was very able to do it because I had my caregivers and I had my sister, that would come. But you still couldn't really fully enjoy yourself and relax, because you're constantly wondering and worrying what's happening, what's going on.
You said something in the very beginning. You are one of 9.
That's where I was going, Jay. I'm so glad we were connected, because I was getting ready to say, where are your siblings?
So unfortunately, I have some siblings that's passed away, and a lot of them live far away out of state. The ones that are close, I did have them here. I have a brother in town that if I needed to run to Walmart, if I gave him enough notice and planning and stuff. But that's just the thing. I had to ask permission to go do something. And that was something that you have to kind of get used to, right? But that comes into play later too. But they were helpful with that. No one was ever really trained on caregiving. So I had sitters with some of my siblings that live around here to sit and talk with mom if I needed to go someplace. But they had not really, were not comfortable doing the care, using the Hoyer lift, taking her to the restroom.
That's a good point, Cassie, because I think about when you start to get an illness of that progression. Our mom was the same way with Parkinson's. There comes a point where you're like, I don't know that I can provide the care that is typically given by someone who is paid, trained to lift, trained to do certain things. That's a big difference between just I'm caring for, someone who is not feeling well, someone who is, it's different when you have to transfer.
Because at her progression level, Cassie, in your experience, she would have been by this point without your skill set, she would have been in skilled nursing.
Oh, absolutely. She would have been in skilled nursing the moment she moved in with me.
Okay. All right.
So I think that's important.
We had looked at assisted living at one time, and she couldn't even do assisted living because of the transfer needs that she needed.
Okay. Yeah.
So I want to, because So you worked with your siblings. I want to go back to that for just a second, because we'll never, everybody knows family dynamics are different. We know it as sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Did you all have, your mom seems so opinionated and directive in her own care.
Mm-hmm.
Did you all as siblings have conversations around what was best to do for your mom, or was it really just between your closest to your mom? Everybody was like, because I could see everybody being like, oh, Cassie's got it. She does this for a living. And so she's good. Was there a conversation around that, or did everybody was just like put their finger on the nose and like, you got it, not me?
It was between me and my mom. I am the youngest by far, but because the family dynamic wise, as you look at that. So, but it was between me and her. It was more of me calling them saying, hey, this is what's happening, or this is what we're going to do, type thing. So, and it's funny, like how you mentioned with my skill set. So I worked, in long-term care for 18 years in the nursing homes, mainly in marketing admissions. And then I became an administrator, correct? Never in my life have I ever used a Hoyer lift. Never in my life did I actually give the care. So I always joked about at the very beginning, like I could run a nursing home, but I could never work in one because I'm not skilled.
That's true.
I'm not a CNA. So I had to be trained by the aides that were coming in to help with my mom. That first week she lived here, we had a CNA who came every morning to get her up and every evening to put her to bed. And I watched, I'm a see one, do one, teach one type of person.
Yeah.
And I watched until I was able to do it. And when I first started doing it, it would take me an hour or more to put her to bed. By the time that we were at the end of everything, 20 minutes, I was done. But so I had to learn that myself as it is.
Yeah.
And it's a difference when you bring someone home to live with you and finding these caregivers. That was another thing. Thankfully, I'm in a small town and she worked in long-term care. My advice I had given throughout my blog post and working with the communities on caregiving was, if you're not able to find those caregivers, if you don't have someone personally, instead of just putting out there on Facebook and getting strangers, go to your local nursing facilities, go to, your assisted livings, and even your hospice. My mother didn't qualify for state Medicaid, so we weren't able to do like home health because home health, that's mainly your Medicaid, and those aren't 24/7, caregiving anyways. But a lot of those who work in home health, the aides, as well as nursing homes, like to do side jobs. That's where they would make a lot more of their money as well. So if you know someone who, for CNA purposes, get into that and have them talk, because, with our caregivers, we had a lot of them stayed with us from the beginning to the end, but we had some that we had to adjust and find new ones in the middle. And it was hard to do, but you rely on people who knew these ladies, and you worked with them on their schedules with the nursing homes.
Yeah.
So that's just another avenue to kind of look at, because private caregiving is hard to find.
Yeah.
I know we were lucky.
Yeah. Cassie, as she progressed on, and I know we've talked about this before, there were several times that you tried to take your mom out. And I know that we talk about placing our own expectations. And there were times during that relationship that there's several wake-up calls that you had. And I think this is important for all of us.
That's a good way to refer
wake-up call.
It was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
When we had the first thought of coming home, and I was selling Mom on that idea, it was a hard decision for her to do. She was leaving Tom, she was leaving her home, she was leaving her puppy, and I was trying to put a silver spin on it like I do everything else. And I thought, we're going to be able to go out to eat, we're going to go shopping, we're going to go out and enjoy, this life. And when she first moved home, she had her van, and we got her in the van to go get a haircut from her friend and went to the farmer's market. And it was a lot to have to do. One of the times I wrecked her van, I hit a curb too hard, knocked the van door off. And so we had to wait for that to get fixed. And that took forever. But one of the things that stick in mind is that we were driving along one day and she was like, man, I want a banana split. That's her favorite dessert. And I thought, you're going to get whatever you want to get. Like, this is your journey. This is all about you. Like my job, my sole purpose right now is to make sure you have quality, like let's do what we want to do. So we pulled into our local ice cream shop and we go in, I'm like, we want a banana split. And this was towards the end of the summer that she had moved in. And we go in, she sit down and they put the banana split in front of her, and her and I just both kind of stare at it. And then just kind of look at each other, because this is the point that she's lost the movement of her arms, except for like from the elbow to her wrist. She can't lift a spoon to her mouth. And my mom, as much as she knows, she still has her dignity that she wants to keep. And she refused to go out to eat because she didn't want to be fed in front of people.
Yeah.
And I respected that. I never talked her into it or tried to, please, Mom, if that's what way she wanted it, that's how it was. So we just sat there and stared at this, and just the look in her eye, and both of us realizing and kind of going back into reality of this is where we are.
Yeah.
She couldn't eat it.
Yeah.
She couldn't eat it. And it was very painful. And she's just like, can we please go? And I said, yep. Yeah. So we tossed it out. I will tell you, and I know we'll get to this here because as my mother has passed away, but the last thing that she ever had was a banana split because I brought it home.
Well, and I'll say this because I know, oh my gosh, like we need like 13 episodes. Like, honestly, it's just, so there's so much, and ALS is, and so we've not had a guest on, Cassie, who's had cared for someone with ALS. It is a cruel disease. I know that they talk about ALS, Parkinson's, and I believe MS are the different types of just very cruel to watch it because of what it does to the body. And you're right in describing it. You feel trapped inside of your body. And I would imagine for you watching this, because I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back to you watching your own mother's decline, being a mother to your small children. You're a wife at this point still, or are you coexisting?
We're coexisting. That's really good to say with that. When with the caregiving, your whole part is that, like I said, it was a quality that I wanted to give her. And so not being able to go out to eat, not being able to have that banana split, not being able to go places at this point in time, all she did was get up and go sit in front of a TV all day, go to the bathroom, sit in front of TV, and then go back to bed. As a caregiver and your expectations that you had, you feel like you're failing them. Yeah. You have all of these dreams and aspirations of caregiving and what it's going to be like, and you feel like you're failing. But I don't like to say that. I always like to tell people that you're not failing. You just went to reality. This is your reality. It's a harsh one. When I'm blogging and she was calling my name every 5 minutes at home, because at this point in time, she'd lost control of her hands. So it's not just throughout the night to turn her. During the day, it's Cassie, come and scratch my nose. I've got something in my eye. There's a hair in my face. Move my arm, move my leg, do this. I didn't want to walk past the living room because if she saw me, Cassie. And I blogged like, I hate my name. Like the sound of my own name is making me cringe. I'm snapping at my kids. I'm coexisting with my husband. It was very, very hard. And I know I'm sitting there sounding like so negative, even to my mind, thinking that. But those who have been in caregiving or those who are going into it, I want them to know that this is a normal thing to feel. Because as much as negative as I'm feeling, there's still that positive and that love. And as time went on with her and she continued to progress, and there have been so many nights that I would just go out to the garage and cry and think, and this is going to sound awful, but I want them to know that this is the truly ugly part of caregiving. As much as you love someone and you're dedicating so much love and energy, there have been so many times I thought going to bed, I hope she goes tonight. Mm-hmm. I hope she goes tonight. And I do that because once she wanted to, this wasn't her life. Right. This isn't the life that she wanted either. But myself, I said, I never thought in a million years I would pray that my mother would die.
She was your best friend, Cassie. I mean, you've said that. She was your heart.
everything. And
because it's no life. And
it's no life for her.
Talk about
or
quality
for me.
of life. And to say, I want you to keep going. I don't hear you saying that you wanted to stop caregiving for your mom.
No.
I hear you saying, this is no quality of life. And I'm not going to be selfish to say, I just want to have one more day. And she just, because she's existing at this point.
It's exactly right. And I mean, she's not able to get on her social media. She's cut off from the outside world. And as the disease progressed, that's when she started choking every time she would try to eat or drink. Mm-hmm. And my mother, being a nurse, was heavy on a DNR. She no feeding tube, no trach, no nothing. At this point, she's 73 years old. It's 2022. And she was doing ALS clinics, and the doctors were like, Carol, we don't have anything else that we can give you because you have progressed more than any of us, our other patients who don't have a trach or don't have the feeding tube. And I looked at them, I said, well, my mom has never done anything half-assed, half-butt. I mean, she's fine. Okay.
It's totally fine.
Okay. But I mean, she's never done that. I mean, she's going to take it to the very end. And that's exactly what she did. Right. She got to the point we put her on hospice because she started choking, and we just didn't have anything else. And it was a conversation her and I had always had, because being in long-term care, we're able to talk about the end and knowing when that's going to happen.
And you have to do that, Cassie. That's so important to talk about.
Because when that happens, when that moment happens, and no matter if they have a disease or not, have that plan in place, because you want to make sure their wishes are being followed, and it takes less off of you to have to make the decisions at the time. So we went on hospice, and the reason we went on wasn't because she was showing signs that she was actively passing. It was, you're going to pass one of these days. And here's the true fact of Indiana. I don't know if this is statewide.
Oh, this is important.
But if someone passes away in their home, then you have to call the police, and they have to come to the home, ask questions, do an investigation, call the coroner, and that person may take an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours to get here. And it's just this whole process of having to, and that's just their job. They have to do that no matter. I can't just say, well, she had ALS, she passed away. I mean, they have to come out, they take photos, they ask questions.
It's ultimately a crime scene.
It is. And, it really truly is, because that's just their red tape that they have to do. We had a neighbor not long ago have a heart attack, and it took 7 hours for the coroner to come. And that's where they laid. So that would be enough hard for just me and my family, like my kids that live here. Now, if they're on hospice, that doesn't happen. They passed away on hospice. Hospice comes in, calls, time of death, and then they call the funeral home, and the funeral home comes and gets them. Yeah, it makes it so much seamless. And that was the reason I wanted her to go on hospice, and so she went on hospice in September of 2022. She was on it a week, choked and aspirated, and it just kind of sent us on a whirlwind. I remember I was at work, because I'm working, kids are at school. Caregiver called me, and she said, Mom choked, and she's having a hard time getting over the coughing fit. Typically it went away within 5 minutes or so. This one wasn't. So it was about lunchtime, and I looked at my coworker and my director, and I said, I'm going to go home and check on her, but I'll be back. I never went back. I stayed with her because I knew healthcare wise that this was going to be, and it was. And Mama passed away in October of 2022. Every wish I would hope to say fulfilled, but that was an experience of itself, being with someone during the dying process. And I kind of go through that in my blog.
Yeah, I think people will want to read your blog, to be honest with you. I think it just
absolutely.
I think your blog has kernels and nuggets of information that is just a resource.
But it was, and I went into mode, but it was beautiful. She was beautiful. And I kind of blog about, how it's kind of interesting, because I've gone back to because I'm turning my blog into a book. So I kind of go through back and to see how that whole anger side of me, the frustrated side, kind of happens. And then because I'm tired of hearing my name so much, and I'm so busy, and there's no time for me. And there's the stillness before she passed. And then there's that stillness after she passed. And so for caregiving wise, I was so used to going 1,000 miles an hour every day, all day. Here it is, April of 2023, and I'm still having to adjust. I'm still announcing to my husband, I'm going to go to Walmart, or I'm going to go over here, because I'm just so used to telling people where I'm going and what I'm doing. Yeah. It's this whole, caregiving never stops. I think that it is the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life. And even if you would have asked me in the middle of it, when I thought I should have never done this, I'd do it all over again. I think it's kind of like childbirth. People are like, this is the worst pain in the world. I'm never going to do this again. But you don't even really remember the childbirth part because you have that child. I always said that caring for mama was a temporary strife for a lifetime of gratitude. I'm so thankful that I was able to do it. I'm so thankful my children were able to see me do it. I'm so thankful that it was only 15 months. And I know that sounds terrible.
No, it doesn't sound terrible.
But I always want to tell people, as long it was her journey, but it's our journey too as caregivers. And we have to understand that, our life is affected, and to have all the emotions tied to it, it's important to know it's normal, and to find an avenue, whether it's venting out through a blog or writing it down or talking to somebody, because your whole life has changed too.
Jay, I'm going to stop it there, because that is like, I think that's so important. And I know that you had caregiver grief. I think we talked a little bit about that, the after, and it's interesting that you talked about, you're still announcing what you're going to do. Hey, I'm going to Walmart, which you would have never done that because you experience a new normal. I can tell you I have a new normal. And we're with our mom, we're transitioning into the next new normal with our mom. And so we've gone from our dad passing in that new normal, and then our mom having a crisis in assisted living, that new normal, moving in with Emily, Lord help us, that normal. And now she's in a nursing home, and that new normal, and adjusting to that. And as daughters, as caregivers and support. So I think that's really important, because I can hear in your story the adjustment as you guys move along in this process. So
I cannot, I know that we, in our notes now, I know, Cassie, that we will list all of your social media. I cannot encourage anyone that's out there as a caregiver to read Cassie's blogs, because not only are they helpful, Cassie, but they're beautiful.
They are,
because they're so truthful and they're so honest.
And they're authentic.
They're just beautiful, Cassie. And I listen, and I say I listen, but I read, and you can see the beauty of the relationship with your mom, but the humor of the relationship with your mom, and the friendship that's there, but the care and the love, the difficulty, because it's hard, but it's just, your journey has been beautiful. I'm so excited about what's going to come out, because I do think you've been a blessing to anyone that's read it. I hope that everybody tags in and reads it, because I know it's just immensely helpful.
Well, and whether your loved one has ALS or not, it's the common thread is the journey, is the caregiver. And how do you, as a caregiver, how do you find the silver lining? How do you, giving yourself permission to have really crappy thoughts, and you're not a terrible person. I mean, I know I say it over and over, Cassie, because I had all those same thoughts related to when I was caring for my husband. It wasn't that I wished he would pass in the sense of, because he wasn't in a place that way, but I just kept thinking, this is awful. I don't want to do this. And because I could do nothing for him. And I relate to you in the sense of, you watched your mom and you knew you couldn't do anything to fix it. Yeah. And
we're fixers.
Yeah. And
absolutely, Cassie.
That is exactly right. Especially as administrators, we're like, no problem. We'll fix that right now. And we're on it, or we'll get a rag and we'll fix that. And there is no fixing it. And you have to just be present and give yourself grace to feel what you're feeling, and be the best that you can be, not what you should be the best you can be.
And I definitely think, Cassie, you have been the best you can be.
Oh,
I'm continuing to be that.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, okay, Jay, we got to do sister questions really quick.
I think Cassie, you have all these nugget sayings from you and your mom. What's one of your favorites from your mom? What's one of the favorite nuggets sayings?
So one of the biggest ones is the life lesson of it. And it's the whole, gosh, just like blank. It's suck it up and deal. that is something that she has always suck it up and deal. And it's always, if things are not going your way, change it. If you can't change it, figure out how to make it work for you. You're the only one that can do it. So, if you're upset or you're sad or you're grieving, feel it, own it, but don't live there and move on. That's something that's something that's always resonated. But yes, suck it up and deal. And we laughed about it the whole time, even through her caregiver journey. But I got a divorce and it was suck it up and deal. It's just I lost a job, suck it up and deal. Like, what are you going to do now? How are you going to fix it?
Exactly.
I love it.
Feel it and then move on.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Don't live.
Okay, so here's the best question. The last one is, what is your favorite guilty pleasure? Anything. What is your
favorite guilty pleasure? Is playing online bingo.
I didn't know that existed, Cassie.
Oh man, there's this bingo blitz game, and I am addicted and have been for well over a year now. It was my escape with mom, because I just sit behind her until she called me the next 5 minutes. So I just get online and start playing a bingo game. And I still, to this day, I will not even tell you how much money I spend on that for credits. We don't even win anything.
You know what? It's the little things.
It is.
So Nelly, it's hashtag, what is it? Online bingo?
Online bingo.
Bingo blitz.
Bingo blitz.
There you are, people. Bingo
Drew Barrymore plays it.
I know. Oh, so
basically
we're besties with Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There you go.
Well, Cassie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Blessing.
Thank you for blessing us.
And all those caregivers out there, you know what? You've got this, and you're doing a great thing, even if you feel like you're not.
Yeah. All right, guys. Till the next time. Thanks, Cassie. See you, everybody.
Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find the video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC.